Welcome to Mikam Israel. As Sefer Devarim opens, Moshe Rabbeinu stands before the generation that would enter Eretz Israel, the sons and the daughters of the wilderness. He has every right to rebuke them, to list the sins of their parents, to thunder against the golden calf, to denounce the sins of the spies, to condemn the rebellion of Korach, but he doesn't. Instead, he speaks in code, Dizahav, Paran, Chatzerot, place names that whisper rather than shout. And Rashi tells us this was Moshe's way of preserving their kavod. It was a gesture of respect. But Rav Moshe Sternbach asks a powerful question. Why such restraint? These weren't the original sinners, and guess what? There was nobody on the outside listening. Why not just say it plainly? And the answer is the foundation of how Torah shapes leadership. Rebuke delivered without dignity leaves no room to grow, but rebuke that's wrapped in respect can change a person's life. Moshe understood that real influence doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from connection. When you value someone, even your rebuke becomes a form of love. And that love, that quiet dignity, can open hearts in ways that thunder never could. Sometimes it could even change a verdict. There was a magnificent story Reb Shalom Tradiron heard while he was collecting for tzedakah in post-war London, a story that would carry with him for decades. A British Jew, once a soldier in the Royal Navy, had suffered grave injuries during the war, and after being rehabilitated, he was granted a full disability pension by the government. But along the way, he discovered Torah. He became a Baal Teshuvah. He immediately immersed himself in learning, and eventually, he even entered a full-time kollel. But for 3 years, he learned with quiet support. But now, it was time for review, and the government looked at his case and said, denied. He appealed, again, denied. His last chance was a hearing in the British military court. He approached his Rav, very distraught, and he asked, should I tell them that I'm learning full-time? That I'm a kollel avrech? The Rav looked at him and he said gently the following, you don't owe them an explanation. Just speak to Borei Olam and say what's in your heart. That's your hishtadlut. Borei Olam will handle the rest. And so, he enters the courtroom. 3 military judges stood before him, stern and unsympathetic. One leaned forward and said coldly, you sit in synagogue all day. You contribute nothing. We call people like you parasites. The room froze, and then he closed his eyes. And when he opened them, his voice trembled, not with fear, but with truth. I am a Jew, and I have a great Father in heaven. When I sit and learn Torah, that's how I speak to him. That's how I live. That's where I find meaning, and that's where I find joy. He looked up and he added, I'll never become a doctor. I know that. I'll never earn a degree. I may never even be known. But if I keep learning, if I keep plugging, if I keep growing, then just maybe, with Hashem's help, one day I'll become a Talmid Chacham. He said it not as a boast, but as a tefillah, not with pride, but with hope. The judges stepped out. 10 minutes later, they returned with their decision. The claimant's pension will be reinstated effective immediately. And, listen to this, for life. The lawyers were stunned. What changed? What happened? Why did they do that? And then the lead judge got up and spoke. A man who had served as a Royal Navy submarine commander during the actual war. He recalled the early days of the conflict when the war just broke out. His submarine had been trapped underwater for nearly a year. Miserably lonely and afraid to surface, they were cut off and forgotten. The crew obviously fell into despair. Some stopped eating, others lost the will to go on, and then something extraordinary happened. One morning, deep beneath the Atlantic, he heard singing. He followed the sound and found 3 Jewish soldiers sitting around large books, Gemaras. Their voices were rising like oxygen through this steel hole. He asked them, what are you doing? And they answered him, this is what keeps us alive. This is Torah. These words, without them, we would have drowned from the inside. The judge paused and then said, when I saw this man in the courtroom, I saw that same light. I remembered the man who kept us afloat, and then I realized every country, of course, needs soldiers, but every country also needs Talmid Chachams, men who ask for nothing, who carry nations along with their silence. That's why I rule in his favor. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world that's drowning in volume, where everybody speaks, including myself, but few speak with weight. where people argue to win but not to uplift. And yet, Moshe Rabbeinu taught us something eternal, that the voice which changes others isn't the one that shouts. It's the one that honors. It's the voice that wraps rebuke in dignity, that cloaks truth in care, that speaks not to break, but to build. And in a courtroom half a world away, a man stood wounded and uncertain and alone and spoke softly of his dreams, not to become wealthy, not even to become powerful, but simply to become a Tamid Chacham. And heaven answered the judge, "This world," he said, "needs more men like that." Every country needs Tamid Chachams, not for politics, not for publicity, but to uphold the sky. And as Tisha B'Av approaches, we must remember the Beit HaMikdash wasn't destroyed only by sin. It was destroyed by the erosion of kavod, by careless words, by fractured hearts. Redemption will come, but not through louder voices, through deeper ones, through words that heal, through the silence that will uplift, through strength that's wrapped in humility, and Torah spoken with awe, because when a Jew speaks like that, when he rebukes without warning and outwording without wounding, he teaches through ego. When he stands with various shouting, that's precisely not what Shemayim answers. It's the quiet voice that Borei Olam looks for. We can do it. Shabbat Shalom u'Mevorach.